Jack grabs Bees, who argues with him, but he calms her down and throws her across. Lucy refuses to do it, but Jack takes her and throws her. Unfortunately, she holds on to him, which almost causes her to fall down the building. The movie begins in Southeast Asia, where the Prime Minister has a deal with a representative of Cardiff, an American company specializing in freshwater systems. When a guard escorts the representative, he suddenly hears gunfire. So he rushes to get to the Prime Minister, but when he reaches him, he's already dead. He then sees a group of armed rebels initiating a coup d'état, and instead of fighting, he slits his throat. 17 hours before the incident, Jack Dwyer, his wife, Annie, and their young daughter, Lucy, and Bees, are in an airplane on their way to the Southeast Asian country. As a new Cardiff employee, Jack is participating in their freshwater installation for the country. During their flight, Bees is looking for his toy, which she calls Bob, and sees that a man behind them picked it up and handed it to her. She then asks him what happened to his hand and other scars, which causes Annie to tell her to sit down and not bother him. Moments later, they arrive at the airport. They're looking for the car the company provided. However, he couldn't call because he discovered that his phone, which was supposed to work internationally, wasn't working. He then tells Annie they will grab one of the guys offering a car outside. The man from the plane interferes, informing them that those guys are scam artists who wear uniforms to look official. He asks Jack where he's from and what company he works for, then he offers them a lift if they'd like and introduces himself as Hammond. Later, Hammond's ride comes, and they meet his local friend and the driver, Som Nong, whose nickname is Kenny Roger. He gives them a ride to their hotel, where Hammond is also staying. When they reach the hotel, the kids see Jack's face on a welcoming tarpaulin. They see the lights, television, and phone aren't working inside their rooms. Jack goes down to the front desk to complain, and the receptionist tells him it's happening in the city. Then, he asks if he's got any calls from Cardiff, and the receptionist says none. Later that night, Jack wakes up when he hears a noise. He stands by the window to check out but doesn't see anything. When he looks at the bed, he sees that Annie isn't there, so he goes to the bathroom and catches her crying. He asks her if she's mad at him, but Annie wants to be left alone. The next day, Jack comes to the front desk and asks the man if there are any words from Cardiff. Still, there needs to be more. He then goes to Kampuchea Chrome to buy a newspaper. On his way, he encounters locals walking through the markets, but he feels weird as everyone looks at him. When he gets to the newspaper stand, he finds that there are no newspapers in English. Unfortunately, when he's about to leave, he gets caught in a confrontation between armed local protesters and riot police. A rebel soldier spots him, forcing him to climb a fire escape and enter through the hotel's window. He sees that the staff are barricading the front, and they tell him to go back to his room. Soon, he hears the window smash, and the rebels enter the hotel firing on the staff. Jack immediately gets on the elevator and goes to his floor. When he gets to their room, he sees Annie and his kids preparing to go for a swim. He tells Annie there's a war and shows her they're overrunning the police and killing people. Then, he asks where Lucy is. Bees tells them she left for the pool when they look for her in the room. So Jack rushes to get there and instructs Annie to stay and lock the door. Annie hears noises outside the room, instructing Bees to enter the bathroom and lock the door. She looks through the peephole to see the rebels go through rooms individually and kill people. On the other hand, Jack has a close encounter with the rebels on his way to Lucy. When he gets to the pool, he sees Hammond, who instructs him to get to the roof. But they went straight to their hotel room. Despite her unwillingness, he convinces Annie that they must get to the roof. When they reach the roof, they meet a group of foreigners and hotel employees looking for refuge. When they settle down, Jack approaches some people and asks if they know what's happening, to which they say they have no idea. Someone then says that he heard the Prime Minister got killed. When he tries to look down, a British man tells him not to go near the edge because they will take a shot at him. Someone approaches him, and he speaks French, so he calls Annie to translate it. The man says that the rebels order them not to resist and that there are no prisoners because they will kill them anyway. He also mentions blood for water, so they go to the receptionist and ask him what they mean. The receptionist says that the Americans took over their water company, and they don't like it. Later, they hear a helicopter approaching, thinking it will rescue them. However, they see the rebels start firing at them when it comes close. Jack immediately puts his family to safety. Unfortunately, the helicopter hits a wire and tears the sign down, so they run directly. Then, the helicopter crashes and explodes. Then, he notices that the barricade is breaking and the rebels are coming, so he looks over the edge and sees a roof. He tells Annie they need to get there, but she tells him he's crazy. He tells her they have no choice as the rebels already occupy the roof, so Annie eventually agrees. When Annie gets to the platform, the kids try to stop her, but Jack holds them back. Annie runs and stops at the edge, saying she can't do it. However, Jack tells her to hurry, and she finally jumps across. Next, Jack grabs Bees, who argues with him, but he calms her down and throws her across. Lucy refuses to do it, but Jack takes her and throws her. Unfortunately, she holds on to him, which almost causes her to fall down the building. Later, Jack throws her again, and then he follows. When they arrive, he looks back to see the rebels' leader holding the welcome tarpaulin with his picture, telling him he's their target. As they climb to the floor below, the rebels fire at them. For a short moment, it's quiet. Jack looks out into the streets and sees a tank, so he tells his family they must move. They break into the offices, and he warns the people inside that there's a tank. The tank fires at the building as they try to run, blasting them to the floor. They try to find a way to get out, but the tank continuously fires, and they hide underneath a broken structure and furniture. Then, they see that the rebels occupied the floor. When the insurgents don't find him and his family, they give up and move on. After that, Jack and Annie converse, and Jack tells her they must get to the American embassy. At nightfall, they come out of hiding. Jack searches the room for things that can help them, and Annie sees a map and searches for the embassy. While she's doing so, Jack witnesses how the rebels run over a group of prisoners on the streets. Then, he returns to his family as Lucy finds the embassy on the map. They start planning their way to the embassy when they hear a noise from a rebel looting the area. The rebel calls for help, but Jack pins him down and kills him. After that, they take clothes from the dead workers to disguise themselves as locals, and he goes down to check if the keys he got fit any of the motorcycles parked. When he finds the right bike, they all hop in and drive in search of the embassy. On their way, they see the city burning, statues toppled over, and dead bodies everywhere. As they turn the corner, they spot a strong rebel presence in front of them. Annie begs him to turn around, but he knows no other way. They move through the rebels who are celebrating their victory. Someone helps them back up when they fall over, causing Jack's face to get recognized. Fortunately, he lets them through, and Jack continues to drive. When they get there, they find it heavily barricaded, causing Annie to have second thoughts, but Jack insists they go. Jack climbs up the walls of the tires and spikes to see if anyone's on the other side. As he approaches the embassy, a small group of rebels spots the family. They escape, hiding in a Buddhist shrine garden nearby. The garden keeper initially tries to get them to leave, but when Annie begs and sees the scared children, he tells the family to follow him. He hides them in the garden and tells them to keep quiet. The rebels walk in and push the man to the ground. Jack sees the rebel put his gun down and approach him to get it. As he gets closer, he accidentally steps on a stick, and the rebel hears him. As the rebel approaches his location, Annie tells the kids she'll help Jack. Then, she gets out, and Jack takes the rebel's gun, but the weapon doesn't have a bullet when he fires at them. Suddenly, a rebel emerges behind him, and he fights off the rebels individually. When the rebels are about to kill him while he's lying on the floor, the leader stops them. They push his face down and force him to watch as they attempt to rape Annie. However, they hear gunfire, and Hammond appears, telling them not to shoot him as he has money and guns. But the rebel pushes him to the ground. Then, he pulls out his gun and starts shooting with the help of Kenny, who turns out to be the rebel behind him. After killing the rebels, Jack runs to Annie and hugs her tight. Then they get the kids, and Hammond tells them to leave as more rebels are coming there. Hammond says he knows a house a few blocks from where they will be safe for the night. Hammond leads the way while Kenny buys them time from the incoming rebels. They prepare to leave, and Hammond tells them to stay quiet, fast, and close. When they arrive at the house, they go to the roof, where they see Kenny making food. Then, they all sit, rest, and eat. After that, Hammond wants to speak with Jack and Annie privately. They stand up, and Hammond shows them the river. He says that the Vietnamese border is a couple of miles downstream, and if they can get across, they will have to give them asylum, then they can leave. Annie thanks Hammond and then checks on the kids going with Jack. Jack asks him if he's a British CIA, to which he says he's something like that. Jack thanks him for coming along, but he confesses he's the one who started it, as guys like him paved the way for guys like Jack to wind up there. He explains that their countries and the corporations who run them are interested in that region. In addition, he says since he got Jack and his family involved, he'll help them get out. He then tells him to sleep because they'll leave in 4 hours. After that, Jack thanks Annie for staying with him through the years because he knows it's not what she wanted and hoped for, but she tells him that her life is much more than anything she could have wanted or planned. A few hours later, Jack wakes up and sees Hammond and Kenny slowly walking. Suddenly, someone fires at them, so he instructs them to get to the wall. He says that there's a gun tower across the street with 4 rebels, he instructs them that he'll draw fire, and they want them to run for the staircase. Unfortunately, Kenny gets killed, and Hammond gets shot. Before he gains strength, he tells them how to get out. They get out into the streets, and Hammond collapses. Jack returns to help him, but he tells them to go as he can't make it. Hammond sees a car approaching him, so he tries to get up and aims his gun at the driver. Even though he kills the driver, he gets run over by the car. Jack starts panicking on the streets, but Annie helps him calm down and move towards the river. Jack sees 2 rebels coming as they get closer, so they hide. Then, he goes to the river alone to look for a boat. When he does, he gives the man valuable things to get the boat. On the other hand, Annie notices the rebels returning, so they escape toward Jack while the fisherman hides Jack. Moments later, they lift the boat, and Jack jumps at the leader and beats him. However, the leader overpowers him and points a gun to his head, causing Lucy to run to him. They shoot Jack and catch Lucy. Then, the leader hands the weapon to Lucy, instructing her to shoot Jack. When she refuses, he points a gun at her head, so Jack tells her to do it, but she still refuses and tells him they need him. Fortunately, Annie came and smashed the leader's head with wood, and they managed to kill the rebels. Annie then takes bees, and they all get into the boat. Another group of insurgents spots them, but they keep rowing since they're near the border. The border guards position themselves and warn them they cannot enter Vietnam. Still, Jack shouts that they're seeking asylum. When the boat crosses the border, the guards turn their guns on the rebels, warning them to lower their weapons. They say that the boat is already in Vietnam and that any acts of aggression will be interpreted as an act of war. Hence, the rebels relent and walk away. After being caught between authorities and the rebels, the Vietnamese soldiers help bring the family into the city. The movie ends with Jack getting treated in the hospital while his family spends time with him. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this to help the channel out. Have a nice day.